Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So what you're seeing here is a brand new series that I'm putting together to really talk about everything on Canadian sales tax. So the reason I'm doing this is I find out there isn't that much of information out there for Canadian specific tax configuration scenarios and use cases. So once I'm done with this configuration, I wanted to put it online to share with you guys from really A to Z, containing like the requirement gathering, also what are the configurations and how that can be applied through real life demo sessions, right? So what you're seeing here is our first episode, so mainly focusing on the introduction. I will start with a high-level Canadian tax requirements overview, and that way you can understand what are the types of taxes and what's the rate and how tax can be calculated and applied, right? And then secondly, mostly for beginners, if you're not familiar with how Dynamics is calculating tax, I'm going to explain to you that logic with a specific example, right? And then also we can see how that can be applied to Canadian tax calculation. And finally, I will walk you through all the following items in the next upcoming episodes. What are the key points I'm going to address so you can really pick and choose to find out what is most useful for you. All right, so I hope this could be helpful. Please like, subscribe, and let me know your thoughts through the comment. And I'm happy to share ideas and learn from you guys as well. Okay, now let's get started. I will start with a Canadian tax rules high-level overview. So you can be assured that Canadian tax is much straightforward than US taxes. The reason is in US, as you probably know already, there are different layers of taxes, like you have city tax, state, federal, and that makes calculation a lot more complicated. But in Canada, it's relatively straightforward as long as you understand the jurisdiction and the type of rates, right? So we only have 4 types of tax: GST, PST, HST, and QST. Sounds like complicated, but I'll explain to you what this represents. Okay, so GST, that's a federal level of tax, and that applies to goods and services like all other taxes, right? And what you need to know is this is a 5% tax rate. I'm going to cover the tax rate in the next episode, but for now, you know GST is only 5% charged at the federal level. And then now we can move on. Let's say if you live in a specific province, let's say in British Columbia, BC, or in Saskatchewan, SK, they may have specific rules applied because they want to charge a provincial level of tax on top of that GST from the federal level. So in that case, you have to pay 2 portions of taxes. One is for your GST at the federal level, and then secondly, you need to pay this PST at the provincial level, and they may have different rates, right? Straightforward again. Now we can move on to say, okay, now let's say you are living in Ontario, and here is where we want to make things easier. Instead of like charging 2 types of rates for both GST and PST, now we want to combine GST and PST into one single rate, which is called Harmonized sales tax. So what you need to do is only to pay this HST as a total percentage combining GST and PST, so you don't have to, pay 2 portions of taxes. As I said, Ontario is part of this group. You also have some other jurisdictions. We will cover that in the next slide. Finally, you also have QST, so self-explanatory. That's only used for Quebec, and that's similar to a PST. It's also a provincial level of tax. So what does that mean is you still need to pay GST at the federal level plus a provincial called QST for Quebec specifically. All right, so just a quick summary. In Canada, you need to pay 2 levels of taxes. One is federal, one is provincial. Federal level GST 5%, and regarding provincial, depending on the region and area, you may need to pay a PST or a QST if that's in Quebec, Or some provinces want to make life easier, then they give a HST percentage. So you only have one HST to apply, and you no longer need to pay that GST portion because it's already included. All right, so I hope this is clear. And again, this is really a high level, most straightforward way to explain it, but you can certainly check out more articles online if you're interested to see more regulatory requirements and explanations. Okay, now moving on, you see the second point here. We want to know how the system defines, or even from business perspective, how we define which tax rates should be applied, right? So I listed two items there. One is the jurisdictions, so the area you're based in. So if you're living in Ontario, then that's HST applied. If you're living in BC, as we said, that's going to be a PST plus GST, right? And then the other element is called the type of items. So again, it's very straightforward. Depending on what type of items or services you're purchasing or selling, there might be different rates or tax exempt, right? So that's on the item side. Both concept or elements will play together, and this will define how your tax rate is applied. And the other thing I also want to clarify, because that was my confusion before, is how I can know what's the jurisdiction that should be applied. So for example, if I'm having a business in Ontario, then that should be HST applied. However, if I'm selling goods to a customer based in BC, then in that case, we no longer consider the HST as applied taxes, because the rule is that where the item lands will determine the tax rate or jurisdictions. So in my case, I'm based in Ontario, but I ship goods to BC. Since the item lands in BC and it's going to be used in BC, then in my scenario, PST is going to be calculated and applied, right? It's no longer HST. Same thing, if I purchase items from Alberta, which is a region only charging GST, then in that case, my Ontario HST is no longer valid. I only have GST applied in this case. Okay, so we're going to cover more with real life examples to help you understand the different use cases and scenarios, what's the rate and how it's calculated in the following episode. Right, so now once we talked about this tax rules, we can move on. I will give you kind of a more detailed view on the tax rules. So here you have the column on jurisdiction. So one thing to note, this slide is really focusing on the area or jurisdictions or the regions. We're not talking about the type of items. That's another parameter, or that's another element we'll cover later on. Right, so jurisdiction Alberta, I mentioned, that's AB in abbreviation. And they are only charging GST, so we have only 5% of rate. You can see the GL code here. We have two different codes, one for sales, GST collected on sales, and the other one is for purchase, so that's GST input tax credits. Depending on the company or chart of accounts, you may have different accounts applied, but in my case, I'm using those two GLs. And then the filing period, we also need to know, so that's on monthly basis for most of the cases. And now moving on, we talked about British Columbia, and that's GST plus PST. So the rate wise, we have 5% GST, 7% for PST for that specific region, right? And for GL code, everything will be posted to the BC sales tax payables, and we recommend to have different GL accounts to trace jurisdiction, so that way when you do reporting or reconciliation, it will be easier for you to find out for each jurisdiction what are the in and outs, right? So in our case, we're using 3150 for BC specific tax payables, again, monthly period. Manitoba, that's same thing, GST plus PST, they have the same PST rate of 7%. And in different regions, for example, Saskatchewan, so SK, they also have PST, but the PST rate is going to be 6% instead of 7%, right? And we also have a different GL code to trace SK specific sales tax payable. All right. Now moving on to HST. If you are living in Ontario, as we said, it's HST applied, that's 15%. knowing that you no longer have this concept of GST plus PST. You only have one single combined rate, which is kind of already priced in the two portions, giving you a total of 15%. And same thing for Nova Scotia and NB, right? And finally, that's the QST we talked about for Quebec. You still have GST plus QST, and QST is going to have a rate of 9.975 with a specific GL posting. So I think this slide really gives you kind of a even more clear picture of different type of rates and how that's calculated depending on the requirement from that specific jurisdiction. Okay, and then I'm going to put a link in the description box with all the detailed tax rates and compliance rules. I can show you real quick. I think this is provided by Avalara, and I'm going to put the link here. You have the different returns compliance with a specific rate calculation, right? And the other link is to explain to you how we define which jurisdiction is going to be used in a specific business case or scenarios, right? Feel free to check it out. Okay, now we have talked about Canadian tax rules. I want to move on to give you a high-level review of how Dynamics is calculating tax. What's the logic? So first thing, you have two portions or elements as we talked before, right? One is from your jurisdiction, which is called sales tax group. This is the technical terms in F&O. And then you also have the second parameter or element called item. So that's basically depending on the service or item. It can be taxable or tax exempt. So we call it in Dynamics item sales tax group. So similar from the technical terms, you have one for jurisdiction, one for item. So for example, this jurisdiction can be applied to a customer account. Let's say if I have a customer account and that customer is based in SK, so that's PST applied. And in that case, I'm going to assign this group, SKPST, to the specific customer. So when I ship goods to this customer based in SK, then SK rates should be applied. And that gives me a federal GST 5% plus a PST of 6%, right? And then on the other hand, you have the item level. So in my list, I just put everything into a whole bucket called all, including all available item taxes. And if you want to have a refined level for items tracking or services or different rates, you can also put, for example, for audio products, then that's the rates for this group, and then have another group for services, then those are the rates. So it's possible it can give you a more refined reporting. But in my case, I will just put everything in a catch-all, and you have all the rates available, right? And now we have the sales tax group and item group clarified how the system is calculating. So the answer is on a sales order transaction, let's say we sell an item to a customer based in SK, then the system is going to pick the common rate across those two groups, right? On the left side, I have 6%, 5%. On the right side, I also have 6 and 5. So the system decided, okay, those two are the common rates. So it's going to apply 6% and 5%. And once that's calculated, it's going to be posted to the predefined GLs that we just talked about in the previous slide here, right? So this is how the system is calculating. And by the way, as a functional consultant, if you want to approach this topic with your customer, it's good to have kind of a data template for them to populate. What's the jurisdiction, what's the type, rate, and also make sure to have the GL code. They will certainly provide you this information and their filing period that will make your configurations process easier with all the data collected in one single data template. We're going to get there in the next episode, right? Okay, so now we have talked about the logic of tax calculation for a Canadian. In next episode, I want to give you some hints or an overall idea about what I'm going to talk about for future episode, right? For next one, I'm going to give you an in-depth configuration review. So all the key configuration points, I'll do it live with you. And then secondly, we want to review how tax values can get defaulted on transactions. So, the tax group, where are we going to assign to on the master data side so it can be flowing into your transaction automatically. And then once we get the configurations done, I will get into the live demos for both purchasing, sales, and also if you're using project module, then we will also have some examples for project transactions posting, right? And finally, we will finalize the series by sharing some standard reports and talk about some electronic filing options. So that's how I imagine what this series could provide you. And I'll put all the links of other videos in the same description box so you can easily navigate to view whatever you need. All right, so I hope this is helpful and stay tuned. We're going to get into next episode for the configurations. Thanks for watching. See you in the next episode.